Hello, and welcome to If Guitars Could Speak, the mini documentary series where we examine one famous guitar from rock history. Today we will be examining a guitar that has been owned by not one, not two, but three iconic guitarists. The 1959 Les Paul standard known as Greeny, after the first famous guitarist to own it, Peter Green. This guitar is known to have one of the most distinctive tones in a Les Paul due to a very interesting and mysterious configuration, but more on that later. Remember, if you like what you see here, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel to see more content like this, as well as clicking the like button down below. So without further ado, let's get started on Greeny. The run of Gibson Les Paul standards made between 1958 and 1960 are known as bursts, for the sunburst finish that was applied to all of these guitars at this time. Amazingly, Gibson went to this finish to attempt to appeal to an exploding guitar market that seemed to be leaving the Les Paul behind. Even though today one can find a number of different color combinations of burst guitars, they all began as cherry sunburst and aged in different ways. Some would fade to a lighter color, some would fade to a darker one. Although these guitars would become legends later, fetching hundreds of thousands of dollars on the vintage market, they were not enough to save the Les Paul from a major revamp to the slimmer SG body style in 1961, due to many players complaining about the old Les Paul's weight. The Greeny Les Paul has definitely faded to the lighter end of the spectrum, even when Peter Green purchased it in 1966 to replace a Gibson Melody Maker he had been playing previously. He had successfully auditioned to take the place of his hero Eric Clapton in John Mayall's Blues Breakers, and he wanted an axe that would be up to the Herculean task of following God. Green was notorious for self-deprecation, and so he would go on to actually speak pretty ill of Greeny, saying that he wished he'd held on to his Melody Maker, and that he preferred the slimmer neck on Clapton's 60 Les Paul, as opposed to the chunkier one on his 1959. But one thing was clear about the guitar: it had a tone that was simply different than any other Les Paul. There are several different versions of the story as to how the Greeny Les Paul got its distinctive tone. Green has said that the tone came from his own tinkering. However, there are other reports that the neck pickup's unusual configuration may be to blame. Today, the neck pickup is installed upside down with the pole pieces facing its brother near the bridge rather than up against the neck. It has been reported that the neck pickup is wound incorrectly, creating an out-of-phase sound with the bridge pickup. It has also been reported that there may be other 1959 bursts that seem to have this exact same pickup problem, so it is possible that someone at the Gibson factory made a mistake and made it multiple times before it was identified. In 1984, noted luthier Joel Danzig examined the guitar and noted that the pickup looked undisturbed, but the magnet was installed upside down. To me, this closes the book on the theories, proving that this was apparently a rare Gibson factory error. Whatever the reason, when the selector switch is thrown to the middle position, the Greeny Les Paul shows why many guitarists have called its tone magic, adopting a quacky, cutting tone that somewhat resembles that of a Stratocaster, which is probably why lead guitarists are enamored by it. As Green rose to prominence in the Blues Breakers and then the early blues-based version of Fleetwood Mac, he found fame to be confining and began to recede from the public eye. Fleetwood Mac would go on to become the pop-rock powerhouse that we know today. Green would then pass the guitar down to a young Northern Irish fan who followed Green's career since seeing him live in Belfast with the Blues Breakers. That guitarist was Gary Moore. Green took Moore under his wing in the early 70s, and so it was only natural that the Les Paul should pass to him. Moore would use it in his current band at the time, Skid Row, and then after meeting Phil Lynott in the iconic hard rock band Thin Lizzy. The guitar's recognizable tone was apparent on all of Thin Lizzy's hits and in Moore's solo work, which even included a tribute album to Green featuring many of his compositions. Moore would get in an auto accident, which led to the Les Paul being damaged in his boot and needing a headstock repair, the biggest piece of damage that the guitar would receive over its life. It would receive the usual upkeep like a refret and the knobs are mismatched, but the guitar's tone and mojo have not been sacrificed in any way. Unfortunately, Moore would be forced to sell the guitar due to financial problems in the late 2000s, and Moore died of a heart attack in 2011. The fate of the guitar would be uncertain for several years, as it was sold to a private collector and put on the market for several $1 million. It fell into the hands of a caretaker named Phil Harris, who did several interviews, shows, and YouTube videos that you can check out by searching for the Greeny Les Paul and Phil Harris on YouTube. But then in 2014, an unlikely, or maybe not so unlikely, buyer swooped in and bought the Greeny Les Paul for a cool $2 million. That buyer was none other than Metallica's lead guitarist, Kirk Hammett. Hammett has been known to be a huge fan of both Green and Moore, with Metallica famously covering Thin Lizzy's Whiskey in the Jar. The best part of this purchase, however, is that the guitar is getting serious use. Rather than hanging on a wall or hiding it behind glass, Kirk decided to take it on tour with Metallica and add an amazing and surprising third chapter in the history of this over 60-year-old guitar. It is where it should be, making music with one of the biggest bands in the world for thousands of adoring fans every night. Thanks for watching another episode of If Guitars Could Speak. If you liked what you just saw, please like the video down below, and also subscribe to the channel if you want to see future content just like this. We'll see you next time.